You're live.
All right, we are back in the Senate Judiciary taking up 626. Markup and a possible vote. We have an amendment that Senator Verhofsky initiated about a week ago. And we're here to get some discussion on that and hopefully vote this out today. Or, well, first do markup and then perhaps vote it out. So, floor is open.
All right, so for the record, Michelle Childs, Commissioners have reached 626. I think we had gone through each section by section last time we met, and the one remaining issue, Senator Verhofsky brought up the issue around, if you recall that one of the witnesses testified for a specific case, and that was the case where 17 and 19-year-old had been filmed without their knowledge undressing. They found out much later, years later, that happened. By then, the statute of limitations had run on the voyeurism statute. The witness indicated that they could not bring the charge under Chapter 64 of Title 13 regarding sexual exploitation of a child, which is like the child sexual abuse materials, because that has a 40-year statute of limitations, everything under Chapter 64, but they could not bring that because the victims were 17 and 19, and that chapter only applies to under 16. We never had that discussion. That's because 16 is the age of consent in Vermont. And so you had asked whether or not Charlie from the network with Domenica Padula at the AG's office had a suggestion of how to approach that issue. And so the language that you have in front of you is the proposal from them. And I don't want to have Charlie here, so I don't want to speak for her, but their suggestion was to add a new penalty provision within the voyeurism statute that had enhanced penalties if the victim was a minor under 18 years of age. So if you recall in the bill as it came over from the House on the new sexual extortion statute, there is a higher penalty when it's a child victim, someone under 18. So just a policy decision for you on this. If you look at the language, it just would be replacing in section 1 the penalty section, which is subsection J. So subdivision 1 would be for if the offense involves a victim who is 18 years of age or older. Subdivision 2 would be for an enhanced penalty. So if you look if the person is an adult, and this is for first offense for voyeurism, it would be 2 years. Any second or subsequent offense would be 3 years. In subdivision 2, and I just picked some numbers that put in there for now. I put for a first offense involving a minor as a victim, it would be 3 years and $5,000, or for a second or subsequent, it would be 5 years. So that's, even though there's other things that are struck there, it's just borrowing from what already came over from the House. And so the only change there is that you would be creating, instead of 2 years for first offense, it would be 3 years if it's a child victim, and for second or subsequent, instead of 3 years, it would be 5 years. So this doesn't get obviously to the issue around age of consent, which is a more complicated one. So that's my guess is why this approach was recommended instead of going into Chapter 64. But for just a policy decision for you, whether or not you wanted to have a higher penalty there.
So, well, Charlie, since you're here, do you want to chime in on it since you worked with Domenica on the plan?
Sure, I would be happy to.
Okay.
Thank you, Michelle. Charlie Glisserman, I'm the policy director of Vermont Medical Plan Domestic Sexual Violence. I really appreciate the committee's recognition of the unique impact of voyeurism on youth. I think that, this proposed language, it's of course a policy decision for the committee. But I do think that this structure, which is mirrored in other parts of the bill, is a good way to accomplish the intent that Senator Biofsky had, and I would be happy to answer any questions on it.
Safe to say you're supportive. You said you're supportive of the amendment.
Yes.
And were there any? I know you can't speak for the AP's office. Were there? Can you share if Dominica was supportive of this as well? Generally speaking.
Yeah, certainly can't speak for the AG's office, but Dominica and I had a great conversation about this language, and I believe it's something they're certainly comfortable with.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Senator Mahosky, you were leading the charge on this. You want to?
Yeah, I really appreciate Charlie and Dominica working on this, and I know that it sort of does not get at the underlying consent question, but I think that this is a clean and simple way to acknowledge the impact on youth without opening up a much bigger thing, and with us moving the statute of limitations on this out to 40 years as well. I think what I was getting at was solved with this amendment.
Thank you. Committee, any questions or comments on the amendment? Senator Cruz.
I was just trying to think about 3 years. I definitely feel like it should be more than the penalty for 18 or older. And in the example that we had, 17 and 19, we're close enough that it doesn't seem to me like that. But if I imagine a 10-year-old, is 3 years enough? This would be my.
I'm certainly open to that discussion. Like Michelle said, these were sort of I don't want to say randomly, but just
I just tried to look at what had an existing law
kind of line it
kind
up.
of to similar things.
Yeah.
But just as a point for
Yeah.
starting the discussion.
And to be clear, 3 years would be fine with me, and I support this amendment. I'm just trying to figure out in my own mind, first offense, if it is a, but it's just thinking of a much younger victim and wondering about that.
I also just want to note, and if you look at subdivision 3 there in the amendment, so it's not changing the law there, but the existing, the language there for 3, that is the dissemination. So the offenses that are in 1 and 2 are for the viewing or recording for things like that. And then the dissemination of that would be the 5 years. So I was just kind of trying to put something in there, but you may, want to consider that as part of policy of like, if you disseminate, there isn't the recommendation from Charlie Dominica didn't have anything with regard to an enhanced penalty for the dissemination, but you could certainly do that, like have and make that distinction there.
So do you mean subsection 3 is for dissemination?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, not this.
Right. So if you look at for subdivision 1 and 2, it talks about B, C, or D. So if you look at those provisions, it's B, C, or D. B is viewing, C is unlawful photographing, filming, or recording. D is surveillance. E is then you're disclosing to a third party.
Of the disclosing to a third party material that they recorded.
In violation of the statute, correct?
So at the end of the day, I don't have a specific suggestion to make, so I can support 3 years. It's more than 2.
Yeah, I think the other question Michelle just raised though is, do we also want an enhanced penalty for the dissemination of those recorded materials if the victim is under 18? which I,
So remember that like, if it's gonna be, if the victim is under 16,
it's
you're
gonna be
gonna
child
trigger
sexual.
the child, the chapter 64 stuff, so you have other additional things
Oh,
that you can.
But if they're 16 to 18.
Right, but if they're 16 or 17, then you're gonna capture it more with this.
But-
Not that they, and they could charge this and they can charge a violation of chapter 64 as well.
well, no, that makes me feel better about this.
Right, so like the 10-year-old victim that you're talking about, right?
Okay, great. That's good.
Yes. I am curious what the committee's thoughts are on an additional enhanced penalty for disseminating the materials if the person is 16 or 17. I can certainly support that, but
Having it go beyond 5 years.
Yeah.
yes,
How many years would you want it to be?
I am not sure. I think we're creating an enhanced penalty if you record it and the person is 16 or 17. It seems strange to me that we would then have the same penalty if they disseminate it.
It's a harsher penalty if they disseminate it.
It is a harsher penalty if they disseminate it, yes.
So first offense for under 18 would be 3 years, and then dissemination would be 5 years. Second or subsequent offense is 5 years.
Mhm.
I'm fine with the language. I don't have strong feelings one way or the other necessarily. I mean, yeah. Going from 5 years to 6 years to 7 years, I don't think. I think there could be a hard penalty for it, but arguing against that. I can be swayed either way.
And 5 years is 5 years, that's, so I'm fine with that. And I guess there's a part of me that thinks, given how easy it is to disseminate a clip, right? You click your mouse once or twice, as opposed to the filming itself, which takes much more setup and it seems to me much more intentional work to create that record, but disseminating it is very easy with the touch of a button. So I agree it should be a harsher penalty, but if you think about it as like 10 years or something, you could have somebody who is emotionally immature, 19-year-old, sends their friend a clip, and then is looking at under this existing law would be a 5-year penalty.
But it would be a clip of something that they had taken the time to prepare.
Yes.
And
Yes.
Yeah.
But all the way of saying I think I'm fine with the 5 years, because the dissemination piece of it, seems, like it could be done in a, non-premeditated, almost non-premeditated way.
I do appreciate how easy it is to disseminate stuff. And I think when I sort of think about the other side of it, it's the impact of that dissemination with one click of a button. Now that is everywhere. And the person who's the subject of that filming, that impact on them is massive.
yeah, I think we've heard so many horror stories in Senate education when we were talking about cell phones and prohibiting them in school. And just all these stories about Snapchat and Instagram and the things that get posted on there, even for a brief period of time, and they devastate people. Senator Maddox.
Michelle, can you remind me I'm thinking of a recent history of my way where there was students in high school that did the same exact thing. So everybody was in that 16 to 18 range. How does that impact the defendant in this case, who is under the age of 18?
So you have some language in here. Double check to see what the
I'm just thinking of an instance where, if it were to happen and the defendant was under 18,
Mhm.
does that mean they kind of,
These aren't
Right, so
big 15 or whatever crimes though are. So if they get pulled into youth, no, juvenile. They get pulled into the juvenile docket.
Right, although I'm not your gal on the, but yes, but I think more on point, the issue is if you look at the language that is actually, we don't have it here on, for this circumstance, but like on the sexual extortion section, we put in some language around kind of the sexting issue, because you do have laws under your obscenity factor in Title 13 around dissemination of indecent material to minors or among minors and things like that. So there's a process for that, kind of right when the phone, so came on, and I don't know if you were here then, kind of about those juvenile sexting laws. So those are in current law, and on the sextortion section, we put in a provision around on page 12, if you look at as a pass by house version, subsection B and F, or those kind of modeled after the limited immunity sections in other areas of law that says, and that was to kind of be like, so if you had someone who's a minor who was sharing images and then get sexually extorted, but is afraid to admit that they shared images because it's technically in violation of the obscenity laws, that you wouldn't get charged under that. So in this particular case, though, there's not consent to the images. It's not like you're spying on someone that they don't know. So you have a 17-year-old who maybe puts a hidden camera in the girl's locker room or something like that. It's a different scenario. This extortion, it contemplates situations where someone shared an image willingly, perhaps, heard a lot of in the house from these families of victims around, teenage boy who's they're talking to another teenager and shares those pictures willingly, and then it's extorted over that. But there's no consent to someone seeing you nude or engaged in sexual conduct or filming you or anything. It's done from the outset without the victim's knowledge. So if there's a distinction there.
So if that were the case, like if it's this bill, they would still be wrapped up in the juvenile.
Yeah.
Swept up into this. I'm just thinking of where they could just fall through the cracks because they fall between 16 and 18 and do this type of voyeurism, and because it's not picked up in the extortion that you're talking about.
So you mean like putting the hidden camera in the room? So they would be subject to the voyeurism statute.
Would.
Yes, it would.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no exemption for it. You guys actually created a higher penalty for that. If the victim is.
Okay.
So.
And even if the defendant's under 18.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you.
My question was answered.
So not to complicate things further, but based on hearing all and having this discussion, I want to just draw your attention to the penalties in dissemination of sexually explicit material, and then also in this extortion, because I just want to make sure everybody's good with what those are and understands what they are, because they are, each statute has some very key differences, right? So as in voyeurism, there's no consent ever. Dissemination of sexually explicit images without consent. There was consent to the taking of the images. There was not consent to disclosure. And so in the bill, as it came over to you, and you haven't suggested any changes, if you look at section 2 and you look at the penalty section, which is on page 8 and subsection B, a person who violates the statute, it's a 2-year misdemeanor, and there's no distinction for age of the victim. So I'm thinking about, and I'm not encouraging one thing or another, I'm just trying to set the stage for making sure everybody's okay with how your penalties all kind of are set for each one of these, is that So you could have a 16 or 17-year-old who can legally consent to sexual activity, might have consented to the recording of an image, did not consent to the sharing of that image, but regardless of the age of the victim, it will be 2 year, and there's no subsequent, like second or subsequent enhancements for that. And again, these are just policy decisions for you, but just noting that in sextortion, and as well as now in voyeurism, if you accept this amendment, you do make a distinction for when the victim is a minor. So I just raised it about whether or not you would want to have that in this situation. Again, if the person is under the age of consent, we're not talking about this because they can't consent in the first place, right? So it would be kind of a 16 or a 17-year-old who, a sex, let's say you have a high school couple and they exchange some images, consensually to one another, and then one of them puts it up on Snapchat from the school.
That would be a misdemeanor.
That's a 2 year misdemeanor.
And so then, what if somebody in this amendment who's under 18 violates
Voyeurism.
voyeurism, then it's harsher.
No consent there.
There's no consent to the taking of the image.
Yeah.
In both cases, the disclosure was without consent, but in voyeurism, the taking of the image is also without consent. So there's kind of this distinction between, I think the original discussion around trying to set the penalties for the revenge porn statute was, well, you consented to the initial taking of the image, so you engaged in something that had some risk, right? As opposed to the person who was secretly recording in the changing room.
I think,
However, when you're talking about minors,
so I think I get it. It's in 16 to 18. Two parties consent to do whatever, and they also consent to video record. But then it's later disseminated against the consent. That's a misdemeanor. But in the situation between 16 to 18, one person is recording another person without their consent at all, and it's disseminated, that's a felony. I think that structure makes more sense in terms of, what people are consenting to and, versus the.
sure, I just wanted to kind of check in,
Yeah.
to make sure with everything. And then,
Senator,
I think I know the answer to this, but let's say there's consent to film and then there's dissemination of the image. The plaintiff says that there was no consent. The defendant said there was consent, but it was for at that point, is it just up to the court to determine who's most credible, or?
I mean, it's up to the states, it's up to the state to determine whether or not they
Yeah.
feel like they have a strong enough case to bring a criminal charge. Remember, there's provisions in here for civil litigation, so somebody could pursue, let's say if the court said, well, all we've got is this person, and this person says this person said this, we don't have anything written, we don't have text, we don't have social media to know. We're not sure whether or not we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt, but there's still always an option for the plaintiff to pursue
And that's a different
a civil action, which would be by preponderance of that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Senator Miles.
Just for my thinking, I was trying to look through and find it. Where does you have one person that commits this voyeurism, they disseminated one person. That one person then sends it to another person, and that person. Does the chain keep going each time it's forwarded on, or is it that initial person is the one that is so after that it's
Because, if it's past, 4, 5, 6
Yeah.
times on or whatever, people don't know,
okay.
So it's the person who recorded in violation of the statute and then
Initially.
shared. Yep. And then also just to note is that for this extortion statute in section 3, the penalties are at the top of page 12, and that's subsection B. And so it's a 3-year felony if the person is an adult, the victim is an adult. It's a 10-year felony if the victim is a minor. And then there's an enhanced penalty if serious bodily injury or that results.
Thank you. So are we, by a straw poll, are we all in favor of the amendment? Right, so, well, supportive of the amendment. Are there any other amendments or changes that we want to make to the bill as amended? In that case, I would entertain a motion to vote out H66 as amended.
So move.
Second, so
I wasn't expecting to vote right now.
You follow the paper. Yeah, I know what I mean.
any further discussion? Great, so Senator Madison, if you could call the roll, please.
Senator Norris,
Yes.
Senator Brew,
Yes.
Senator Matos, yes. Senator Bukowski,
Yes.
Senator Hashim,
Yes.
5-0.
Who would like to report this out?
I can report this out.
Want me to send you
Signature.
anything kind of
Yeah,
support materials or you got it?
I think I probably got it, but if I need anything, I'll let you know. Okay. I also have this, like I had the weekend, so.
And I think
Can't get
I
it too bad.
might have given you one, it's not, I can, you have like a summary or summary report. I believe, program. Okay, for the house. So,
Yeah, if you wanna maybe bump that to the top of my inbox,
okay,
that might help me
sure.
just figure out what I'm gonna do.
Nice in the shop.
Sure. So you can get from Monica?
Yes, you're now going to switch gears to H410. Going to hear from the Crime Research Group and then do any markup necessary and then probably have a vote on that as well. I think Monica is on the Zoom.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, morning. Can you hear?
How are you today? I can hear you, yeah.
Doing pretty well. Thank you for joining us. Sorry we're a few minutes behind, but happy to hear your thoughts on H410.
Oh, sure. Yes. Well, thank you for inviting me to testify. I certainly heard the walkthrough that Michelle provided you last week. And we've also provided testimony in House Judiciary as they put forward the bill. I don't want to go over a lot of the same information, but just wanted to sort of give you a little bit of the background around the recidivism and the fact that the current measure, which is in statute in Title 28, Section 4, it is just not useful for people, and also misses a big group of people who are involved in the justice system. So the purpose of this revision is to just make it a much more straightforward definition, make it a little bit easier to calculate. And I think the big issue with the recidivism is moving it from the responsibility of the Department of Corrections over to the Statistical Analysis Center. And of course, the Crime Research Group currently has the contract to offer the SAC services. So I did hear a few of your questions. I didn't hear a lot of questions, but I did want to comment on one of the ones that I heard, just in the definition of recidivism, around the use of the word clock. And I do know that was something that we went back and forth on, not necessarily our favorite term either. And I think I could offer maybe instead of the word clock, we can change that for something like measurement period. So the measurement period for calculating recidivism would begin and the sentence would continue. I don't know if that sounds like a better terminology to you.
Was the recommendation measure of period?
Measurement period.
Measurements.
Measurement period.
What about just saying for recidivism calculation?
Yeah, what about the recidivism calculation set?
The recidivism calculation, that would work too.
Okay. I know it's a small change, but your instance, well, actually, committee, what are your thoughts on that?
I always prefer my language.
I getting other answers.
Oh, well. Okay.
Is there any opposition to taking out the word clock and just putting in the recidivism calculation? Jill,
It's not, but I'm gonna copy of this bill because I don't hear the habits.
all right, well, that is helpful.
Okay, yeah, and if it,
We'll make that small amendment, but also happy to hear your thoughts on anything else that you wanted to share with us.
okay, yeah, I just wanted to let you know that so for the recidivism bill and that calculation, the crime research group is currently capable of calculating that measure. We will have to work with the Department of Corrections to get some of the data that we need, but we don't anticipate that will be any issue at all. And then as it came to the other reports that are listed in the section, the annual reports, these are some reports that were required of us in Act 40 of 2023, and they've just been carried over to be continued in this report. So you'll see the bail rates is something that was in Act 40. And so this will give us an opportunity to continue publishing that and also to work with the judiciary on sort of refining the extract and being able to produce and show more data in the report. So that's the effect of that. Again, with the arrest and clearance rates, that is a carryover from Act 40. And so we're capable of doing that right now. Those are online actually. And then when you get to the most convicted 4A and 4B, those are kind of new. And the reason we sort of landed on those is because those are common questions that people are asking us. And so we thought that would be helpful to just make that available for people. But other than that, we feel very comfortable with this bill. And of course, you know, there is an appropriation attached to it because it is new work for us and would require a little bit of extra resources for us to be able to produce these on an annual basis. And we tried to keep that as cost effective and efficient as we could.
Thank you. Senator Bohosky, has a quote.
Yeah, in years past, when we've talked about recidivism, we've also talked about desistance and
Correct.
yeah, both of those things. This bill does not address both of those things, which I actually think is fairly important. And I'm wondering if you have the capacity to not only give us recidivism information, but desistance information.
Yeah, we actually intentionally, the original version of 410 did have desistance in there as a possible measure, and we suggested taking it out because right now it is not something that is clearly defined. It's not something that is easy to measure. The data is difficult to identify and access, and so our suggestion was to sort of let us and other partners work a little bit more on what that means and the data that we would need in order to accurately provide some type of desistance measure.
Okay. I thought that last biennium, we did define assistance in statute. I think we used the federal definition. It was in another.
There is a definition. Now I have to go back. There is something in Act 40, which I can, but it was a very vague definition. So let me, if you don't mind, let me just pull it up because I have it on my computer right here.
Okay, so that'll be faster than me trying to pull it up then.
Yeah. Sure. So this is the issue with this. This is bringing this back to me. So the definition in Act 40, desistance means the process by which criminality or individual risk for antisocial conduct declines over the life course of the individual, generally after adolescence. So sure, there's a definition, but there's no data that supports that definition. There's nothing in the administrative data that exists right now that helps us to operationalize that definition. And so we did some of that work as we were working through Act 40, and we just recognized along with our partners that we don't have the data in our criminal justice system right now to be able to measure it. We did put a little bit of that explanation in the Act 40 report as well, so I could certainly send the link back to you all about that describes to you the steps that we went through and the conversations we had with people around desistance.
Mm-hmm. I guess, so I appreciate that, and I don't want to ask you to do something you can't actually do. And I guess what I want to see, and I don't know if there is language that can go in here, is not only looking at recidivism, but looking at the type, if someone was charged in 2025 with aggravated assault and in 2028 is charged with shoplifting, like, yes, that's recidivism, but it's not a violent crime. It's, like, I want to be able to look at what is, I want to build to the point where we can track desistance, I guess is what I'm getting at. And I don't know if there's we can put in here to move us in that direction.
Right. I do understand your point. And I'm just thinking off the top of my head. And I think the issue is also around, so right now we use a classification of crimes that is a sort of like a severity index, and trying to make sure that people have sort of an agreement on that index and to whether or not like this crime is more or less severe than that crime. And so we'd have to really think a little bit about that. I guess what I would say is that we would need to spend time really working with a lot of other partners on what that would mean and what that would look like. Additionally, I think the other thing that we talked about with our, a lot of it is with our community provider partners who have a lot of the information around desistance as well, or could potentially have it, is the changes in their systems and processes that they would need to make and the resources that it would take for them to do that in order to also include it in an administrative data set. So it is sort of like wanting to get there. It requires more of a planning process, and potentially resources to be able to get to the point where you can have the information that I know you're looking for.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I guess what 2 years ago, we talked about that. We put the definition in statute to try to move us in the direction of getting that data. I don't want to be here 2 years from now, once again, being like, oh, yeah, still like, I want to be moving us in that direction. And I don't know how to do that, I guess.
Committee, any further questions or comments for Monica? Monica, so aside from the small grammatical change that we're making in section 1, do you have any other requests or recommendations for this language throughout the whole
For
thing?
this language, no, I think the rest of the language is fine. We worked through it with the House Judiciary Committee. We didn't have any other issues.
Actually, I don't know if this is for Monica or for Michelle on page 2, line 6, recidivism. It says the recidivism rate shall be calculated using a 3 and 5 year period.
Okay.
What is the reason for that?
Well, I think, I mean, I can certainly answer that. So those are sort of the follow-up periods, and people are interested in seeing if the recidivism rate drops off or what happens to the rate between 3 and 5 years. So we take a group of people and we'll look at them over 3 years and calculate the recidivism rate, and see if what it is in 3 years and then 5 years. And this could get into the desistance issue as well, to see if the rate is lower. Also, it can just pick up people who may end up committing crimes after that 3-year period. So it just gives you a longer time to look at people. And that's pretty much sort of the way it goes in the literature and the research. There are some look back periods that are 10 years. We have done that before, but most times when we're doing some sort of a recidivism study, we're going to capture the bulk of the people within the 3 years and a high percentage of them within the first year that they're eligible to recidivate.
So are you suggesting then, Monica, that if we do the 3 and 5 year period, that this is something that the data that became available, the assistance could be made operational by using that 3 and 5 year period? What you're saying?
I'm just saying, like, there's one way you could look at it is to see if people, I mean, the research just shows that generally one, as people age, and that over time you're going to see people age out of crime, and the longer period, most people are not going to be repeating. So that is something that shows, but I don't think that's the desistance, the type of desistance measures that we're talking about, or that you have talked about in previous conversations.
Anything else?
I have a question about the bail piece, and I'm wondering if the way this is written, if that report will capture how many people are unable to post bail and how long they are held because they can't afford bail.
So the question will be if bail is paid or not. We will not know why bail has not been paid. So the ability to pay it or not pay it will not be answered. It will just be, is there bail? Was it posted? Yes or no? Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else? So we have one small amendment that is in or
I just sent it to editing, and so I imagine they're just doing it right away. So if you want to take a look at it, this morning, I should get it back very shortly.
sounds good. So aside from that amendment, is there anything else that we want to do on this bill?
I don't know how, but I do want to have us be moving in a direction where we're capturing desistance data. And I'm concerned that we did something 2 years ago and we're still in a spot where we just can't do that. But I don't have my mind wrapped around how to do it here. I think it's important data for us as we think about criminology. But again, I'm just trying to wrap my head around how to possibly do it.
So maybe I didn't capture it correctly, but it seemed like at least some degree desistance would be captured by this, or did I misunderstand some of your testimony, Monica?
Right there. No, yeah, if I confused you, I apologize. I don't really think we'll be getting, I don't think anything that we're reporting would be considered a desistance measure, other than the fact that recidivism is like the opposite of it. I do want to share with you one thing that we are hoping to do that is a continuation of Act 40 related to desistance, and we're just waiting to hear if we can get continued funding from the Bureau of Justice Statistics for this research. But we will be accessing Department of Labor data if we get this next round of money. And so we'll give them a cohort of people who have been released, and we'll be looking at their wage and their earnings, and we're going to be trying to match them up and just try to start working on desistance from that perspective, from an employment perspective, and see whether or not we can make any connection between those two. So that is a direction that we're moving. We're just waiting to see if we get continued funding for that work.
I just add something. So I just wanted to clarify. So Monica had read to you the definition that is in Title 28 of desistance, and where that comes from is the requirement that every 3 years there's certain reporting requirements. So there is this provision in here now that reporting requirement, which it'll be done again in 2027, so next year, is it includes desistance. Says the evidence of desistance, including successful completion of community supervision. So my guess is that, so there already is using that definition, this requirement as to what information they're able to gather. Well, it's going to be obviously up to 0G under that, but there's that. So there will be some reporting on that as to however much they can comply with that at the point in terms of the data. And then maybe as things kind of percolate along, if they're able to figure out a more focused, better way, and then you can consider that a later time for the annual reports.
I think given that we're going to be getting that report, is it January 27th or is it December of 27th?
November of 27.
Okay, I think I'm okay for now then. Maybe this is something to come back to when I'm next year or 28 when I have more time to think about it.
And Senator, yes, I mean, I can, if you'd like, I can send the link to the desistance and recidivism work that we did in Act 40 that was submitted in 2024. So just so you can see what we did and the conversations that we had, if that would be helpful for you.
I think that would be helpful. Yes. I think given that information, I'm okay to not deal with this right this second in this bill.
All right, so I don't know that we really need to see the amendment language. I think we all are able to visualize it by taking out the word clock and just rephrasing it to the recidivism population.
I'll just join you. So in section 1, if you're looking at the same version I do on line 13, so you would strike the words clock for calculating. And then after the word recidivism, you add in the word calculation. So it would be recidivism calculation shall begin on the date of the individual. That's.
Everybody good with that amendment? Yes. So I would entertain a motion to vote this out favorably as amended.
So.
Is there a second?
Yeah.
All right, that was sound. Any further discussion? Well, that's it. So Senator Mathis, I'd like to call the roll.
Sure would. Senator Norris,
Yes.
Senator Brewer,
Yes.
Senator Meadows, yes. Senator Bielski.
Yeah.
Senator Machine.
Yes.
5-0-0.
Who would like to report this bill out? This bill.
I already took one.
You did? This bill from the, yeah. Thanks, sir.
Yeah, I'm not going to go to stars. And then he can do. They don't jump on. I won't have enough for, but you didn't jump on.
No, I didn't trust Bill.
Disclaimer.
Disclaimer.
Well, I said I wouldn't force you to take any other,
That's right.
yeah,
That's right.
Well, we
but it doesn't stop you from volunteering.
Not yet. You're right.
Feedback on later that. Let's say have the rules. We don't have to decide who reported. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your ad number?
For the amendment,
Will that be 1-1?
yeah. And, as soon as I have it back from editing, I'll email it to everybody, including Emery's. And I'll work on summaries for you.
Thank you, Michelle. You were very much appreciated.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
All right, so let's take, did Eric say he's gonna be able to come down for some? No,
Oh, he is homesick today.
Oh, okay.
So, I don't know. I'm not sure if he's working from.
Let's go off live for now. Please. Thank you, Eric.